Ariel Helwani standing alongside the president of the UFC, Mr. Dana White. And Dana, thank you so much for the time today. I want to take you back to July. That's when I first heard a rumor that WEC was merging with the UFC. And since then, I've gathered a lot of information. Now I confidently present it to you and I ask you the question, is WEC merging with the UFC?
Yes.
When?
The last fight for the WEC will be in December. Then every fight from there on out, the 55-pound division will roll into our 55-pound division, and we will add all those lower weight classes.
Now, people have obviously been bugging you about this for quite some time. Why now?
The timing was right. The reality is, we purchased the WEC. We started these, getting these lighter weight guys exposure on television, sending them around the country and arenas. Now, as the UFC continues to grow globally and we're doing more and more fights, now it makes sense to bring in those lighter weight classes.
Was this always the plan from the beginning, just sort of build that brand, build those fighters, those weight classes, and then eventually merge them together with the UFC?
Yeah, it all depended. We put the WEC out there. We knew that we could get, we knew the fights were exciting. These lighter weight guys were great. Get out there, build them some exposure while we were putting together the global plan, because you never know how fast that thing's going to go or how it's really going to work. But it's worked out incredibly. We're going to add more fights every year and add more countries and more television networks in different countries. So now it makes sense.
Now, there are 2 WEC events left on the calendar on Versus. There's one coming up in November. There's one coming up in December. Any hesitation on your part to confirm this now before those 2 events are done, just so that they don't seem like, lame duck events? You know what I'm saying? Like when a coach gets, when someone says to a coach, okay, you're about to get fired at the end of the season, that kind of thing.
But nobody's getting fired. There's
right.
Nothing lame duck about it. I mean, the great thing about the WEC and what people have loved about it is, tell me the last time you saw a boring WEC event from top to bottom. These lighter weight guys go after it. And, I actually think it's cool that you'll have the opportunity to see 2 more WEC events before they roll into the UFC.
So have you started to think, obviously people are wanting to see, Uriah Faber in the UFC, Jose Aldo, all those guys. Have you started to think about, how you're going to introduce them to the UFC audience?
Yeah, I think that, I think the people that watch it on Versus are the UFC audience anyway. I mean, you're a fan of mixed martial arts, and, once they come into the UFC, they're just going to be part of the whole machine. The way that we promote fights and do it now, they're just part of the whole deal.
Sort of along those lines, there was a rumor that Jose Aldo was offered a fight against Kenny Florian, and that got people to think that maybe this was happening sooner rather than later. Was that in fact true, and was that your plan in terms of introducing him to the 155-pound weight class in the UFC?
Yeah, the answer is yes to both. We already knew this was going to happen, and we'd been working on it for a while, and he had talked about going to 155 pounds, and Kenny Florian would have been a great test to see if he was ready for that title.
So who turned down the fight?
Jose Aldo did.
Are you surprised by that?
Yeah, I thought that he wanted to fight at 55. If he doesn't, that's fine. But, we heard he did, and so we offered it to him.
But now that 135 and 145 are coming to the UFC, doesn't it sort of make sense to keep him there at 145 so he could be sort of like the poster boy, the dominant champion at that weight class?
Yeah, definitely. Depends on what he wants. If he wants a few more fights there and then maybe try to move up to 55, it's all up to him. I don't ever try to tell guys. It's like at the last press conference with the Diego Sanchez thing. I think Diego Sanchez in shape looks awesome at 170 pounds, better than 155. So I say that's how I feel, but it's at the end of the day, he needs to make his own decision.
Any idea when we will start to see 135 and 145-pound bouts in the UFC?
Immediately. I mean, these guys are going to roll right into the UFC now, starting in January. So,
is it possible that maybe you need an extra fight on a December card or something that we might see it before January?
Probably not. No, it's probably. I think it'll happen in January. Will be the first one, but who knows? I never say never. Anything could happen.
Obviously, people want to see Aldo. Any idea when he will debut in the UFC?
Probably in January.
You think he will defend the title, which I presume will now be the UFC featherweight title?
Yes.
Against who?
I don't know yet.
Some people were talking about Mark Hominick, all that stuff. A little premature, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me ask you in terms of TV. Obviously, UFC is on Versus now, but also WC is on Versus. What does it mean to have the WC guys go into the UFC for your relationship with Versus?
We kicked this thing off. We did two two UFC fights on Versus, and now we're going to do a deal with them for 4 fights in 2011.
So there will be 4 fights on Versus that are UFC, obviously, fights. What about Spike? Same deal?
Yeah, well, like I said, we have the deal with Versus right now, and we have our deal with Spike, so it's all good.
And just curious, obviously, you used to put on more than 4 events on Versus in the past, WC and UFC combined. What about those extra events that are just kind of up in the air? Is it just, because you're now giving them the 4 main UFC cards, it just kind of evens out?
Yeah, in our Spike deal, we can do 4 other fights. So we're doing as many as we can on another network.
Any idea when the first UFC on Versus officially, with the guys coming in there, will be on Versus?
I don't yet.
Okay. Would the thinking be to put those guys on those cards, the guys who have made a name for themselves on the Versus cards, to keep them fighting on those Versus telecasts?
No, we're gonna put UFC fights on. These guys are UFC fighters. Once this thing rolls in, they're UFC fighters. They'll be fighting everywhere, on Spike, Versus, and pay-per-view, and everywhere.
And what does this mean in terms of your staff? We know that there are people who work for WEC only. What does it mean for them?
Yeah, they're gonna roll into the UFC now too. Listen, this thing isn't getting smaller; it's getting bigger. We need the staff.
Was there a reason why you did it now in terms of you're putting on so many events, you need more title holders and things like that, or is it just the timing with the TV deals and whatnot?
No, we're at that point now where we're doing more fights in more places and we need more guys. I've been waiting for this day. This is actually a great thing for mixed martial arts, and I can't wait till we add more weight classes now, which will.
Good point, because 125 has been one that people have been talking about for a long time. Is that ever going to happen?
Yeah, it's absolutely positively going to happen, and this merger happening is great for everybody. It's great for the sport. It's great for the lighter weight guys, and it's great for the guys who don't have a place to fight right now.
Speaking of TV situations, you recently talked to broadcasting and cable, and they were asking you a bunch of questions about TV deals and whatnot. Since we're breaking news here, anything else you want to break?
No, I think they pretty much asked me everything. Listen, the guy asked a lot of great questions, and that I really can't answer right now. So I did my best.
Okay. Final questions. UFC 121 just ended. Have you talked to Brock Lesnar since?
I have not. I've talked to his guys, but I haven't talked to Brock.
What do you think his mindset is like right now?
I think he's he's probably sore, and it's the first time he's ever had something like that happen to him. He's taken a couple days to rest and relax and sleep and hang with his family. And Brock and I will probably talk in the next few days.
Speaking of Mr. Lesnar, I'm sure you're aware of this whole situation with The Undertaker that has taken a life of its own online. Are you disappointed? I mean, now we sort of have figured out that The Undertaker was sort of going into business for himself here in terms of trying to create this moment and challenging Brock, so to speak. Are you disappointed that a WWE guy would be sitting cage side of your event and just sort of do something like that and maybe in some ways just, kind of mess with the integrity of MMA and the UFC?
Not really. I don't think it messes with the integrity. I know The Undertaker. I've known him for a long time. I give him those seats. He's a good guy, and whatever his thing is, it just so happened you happened to be standing there. Brock walked by him, and he said what he said, and everybody went crazy about it. But no, it doesn't bother me at all.
Okay, final question. Tito Ortiz, have you made a decision on his future?
No.
You're about to say something.
I said, well, no.
All right. So there it is. WC merging with the UFC come January 2011. We look forward to that. 4 events on Versus. The same amount of events, of course, on Spike TV. Dana, we thank you for the time.
Thanks,
Congratulations on the news. We look forward to those fights going down in the UFC in the near future.